In a world where loyalty is bought and betrayal is currency, Bianca Caldwell built her life around trust, family, and ambition, until a single brutal act of betrayal shattered everything she believed in. Her husband, Gregory, didn't just cheat on her. He sold her out, stripped her of dignity at their daughter's graduation, and handed their legacy to a faceless syndicate led by the elusive power broker, Volkov. Left, humiliated and broken, Bianca rises from the ruins of her past, navigating a ruthless underworld of corporate warfare, offshore empires, and cyber espionage. What starts as a quest for personal revenge against her husband evolves into a high-stakes war against an entire global shadow network. With everything on the line, her family, her freedom, and her life, Bianca must outwit, outfight, and outmaneuver enemies who have always operated in the dark. Because when you play by their rules, you lose. But when you rewrite the rules, you become unstoppable. Rick Donnelly had always known that the world was changing faster than he could keep up. But he never expected it to swallow him whole so ruthlessly. 62 years old, with salt and pepper hair and a backstiff from decades of sitting at the helm of spreadsheets, Rick had been the chief financial officer of Meridian Manufacturing for 15 years. He had weathered storms that had broken lesser men, recessions, market crashes, hostile takeovers. But the tsunami that hit him this time came not from the outside world, but from within the very boardroom he once ruled with quiet authority. 3. Months ago, Travis Mercer swaggered into the company like a tech messiah, armed with buzzwords, disruptive jargon, and a pair of expensive sneakers Rick suspected cost more than his entire wardrobe. Travis had the charm of a game show host and the ruthlessness of a Wall Street raider. The board, hungry for innovation and fearful of becoming dinosaurs in a digital world, handed him the keys to the kingdom without hesitation. It wasn't. Long before Rick's instinct screamed that this wasn't just about innovation, something far more insidious was brewing. The first crack appeared subtly. A consulting contract was awarded without procurement clearance, 4 times the standard rate, and to someone suspiciously close to Travis. Rick flagged it internally, only to receive a patronizing email from Travis about the need for agility in modern business. The second red flag came when Travis rerouted financial reporting through his newly installed Chief Innovation Officer, another tech prodigy with a dazzling resume, but no real-world scars. Rick understood what was happening. They were insulating, the financial data cutting him off at the knees, but the real dagger came during their so-called one-on-one meeting. Travis perched on Rick's desk like a vulture, his sneakers on the mahogany surface Patricia, Rick's late wife, had once polished with pride. "Rick," Travis said, that faux sympathetic tone dripping from his lips, "you're just a little too old school for where we're headed. We need someone who can innovate." The words weren't surprising. What caught Rick off guard was the sheer audacity. Travis wasn't replacing him with a seasoned hand. He was bringing in Zachary Hughes, a 29-year-old wunderkind who had dazzled TEDx audiences with talks on blockchain finance and decentralized corporate structures. The writing was on the wall. The announcement would be made in 2 weeks. Rick spent the afternoon packing his life into a cardboard box, while the rest of the staff gathered for an all-hands meeting to celebrate their new direction. 15. Years of service reduced to a footnote in the company's minutes. Bethany from accounts, loyal, efficient, quietly terrified, teared up when she saw him by the elevators. "Don't worry," he told her, masking his humiliation behind a thin smile. "It's all part of the cycle." What he didn't tell her was that for 6 months Rick had been meticulously documenting every anomaly, every irregular transaction, every ghost vendor that appeared shortly after Travis's arrival. He hadn't planned revenge. He was simply doing his job, keeping the books clean. But now, standing in the cold, sterile lobby of the company he'd helped build, something shifted inside him. A resolve cold and sharp began to form. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he laid out the evidence across his dining room table. Patricia had always said that the river view calmed his overthinking brain. But tonight, the Ohio River outside, His window only seemed to churn with suppressed rage. The transactions told a damning story. Shell companies registered days before key appointments, invoices for services never rendered, consultancy fees routed through offshore accounts. And at the center of it all, Alpine Innovations, a holding company formed 3 days before Travis was hired. This wasn't incompetence, this was theft. A systematic siphoning of company funds under the guise of digital transformation. Rick realized they hadn't ousted him because he was old-fashioned. They'd pushed him out because he was the only one paying attention. He compiled everything. Cross-referenced accounts, built timelines, traced money trails. He wasn't going to barge into a board meeting waving papers. That wasn't his style. No, he would let the numbers tell the story. But this time he would make sure the right people listened. A week after his departure, he reached out to William Foster, the chairman of the board, and someone Rick had once considered a mentor. The man who'd overseen his hiring back when Harold Phillips still ran the company. William's tone was frosty, rehearsed. "Rick, Travis mentioned you might reach out," William said carefully. "I hear you're struggling to transition." "This isn't about the transition, William," Rick replied, trying to keep the bitterness from his voice. "There are irregularities, significant ones, predating Zachary's arrival." Silence. "Rick, I think you're seeing patterns where there aren't any. You know how hard these changes can be. The board has full confidence in Travis's vision." William's words felt rehearsed, like a script written by Meridian's legal team. "Perhaps we can catch up at the holiday party," he added, as if Rick had been nothing more than an old colleague retiring quietly into the sunset. The next morning, an email arrived from Meridian's legal department. Veiled threats, carefully worded reminders about defamation and confidentiality agreements. The message was clear: back off, or face legal consequences. Rick realized that Travis had already begun poisoning the well. His reputation was being dismantled methodically. Rumors were being seeded about his difficulty transitioning, about mistakes in his last quarterly reports, even whispers of ethical concerns. They weren't just pushing him out, they were erasing him. He met Kevin from Internal Audit at a nondescript diner on the outskirts of town. Kevin looked like a man trapped between a paycheck and his conscience. "They promoted me, Rick," he confessed. "Direct report to Zachary now. New systems, new software. They're locking down everything." "Have you noticed the discrepancies?" Rick asked quietly. Kevin hesitated. "I can't, Rick. They're watching. They had me sign extra NDAs. They're even implying you might have made the errors. I'm sorry. I can't jeopardize my family." Rick squeezed his coffee mug until his knuckles turned white. "Take care of them, Kevin. I'll handle the rest." That night, Rick executed the ace up his sleeve. During his final days at Meridian, he'd set up a contingency, admin account on the audit server. Standard practice in theory. No one had revoked it yet. He knew it wouldn't last, but he didn't need forever. Using the credentials, he dove deeper than he ever had before. What he found was worse than he imagined. Alpine Innovations wasn't just one shell company. It was the centerpiece of an intricate web of phantom vendors, offshore accounts, and layered holding companies that spanned multiple jurisdictions. Some transactions dated back before Travis's arrival, indicating this wasn't Travis's scheme. It was a coordinated attack, a long game that involved board members, outside investors, and probably even regulatory bodies turning a blind eye. By dawn, Rick had traced over $12 million siphoned from Meridian through falsified contracts, inflated service fees, and ghost consulting gigs. His initial plan to quietly alert the board now seemed laughably naive. This wasn't about saving his old job or his reputation. It was about saving the company from vultures who had dressed themselves as innovators. Rick sat on his porch staring at the river, Patricia's voice echoing in his mind. Water calms your overthinking brain. He would need that calm now more than ever. The days after Rick's deep dive into the fraudulent labyrinth were a blur of restless nights and cold, calculating days. Rick knew that exposing this tangled conspiracy would require more than evidence. It needed a narrative, a spectacle, something that would grip the stakeholders by the throat and refuse to let go. And he couldn't do it alone. Enter Sarah Quinn. She had been one of Meridian's top corporate attorneys before she'd resigned abruptly a year ago, citing ethical misalignments. Rick had always admired her tenacity and incorruptible moral compass. She had also been Patricia's friend, another reason Rick trusted her implicitly. Their meeting at Sarah's modest book-lined office downtown was tense but warm. "Rick Donnelly," she said, pouring them both black coffee. "I heard you got the Travis Mercer treatment." "He's just the tip of the spear," Rick replied, laying out his files on the table. "It's a cancer, Sarah, and I need help exorcising it." Sarah leafed through the documents, her face growing grim. "You weren't exaggerating. This is systemic fraud. RICO territory if we can tie it to organized collusion." "Can we?" Sarah smiled thinly. "We will. But we'll need a strategy. They've already started painting you as the disgruntled old-timer. We need to flip the narrative, make them look like the amateurs." Rick nodded. "We bait the trap. Publicly." Sarah leaned forward. "How public are we talking?" Rick took a deep breath. "We leak just enough to get them to react, panic. And when they do, we catch them red-handed." Rick's first move was deceptively simple. He uploaded an anonymous white paper to an influential corporate governance blog, dissecting an unnamed company's suspicious financial practices. The data was scrubbed clean of identifiers, but the patterns were unmistakable to anyone inside Meridian. The post exploded across LinkedIn, corporate watchdog forums, and finance Twitter. Within hours, whispers of "who could it be" morphed into knowing nods and sly DMs. Travis and his clique took the bait. An emergency town hall was called by Travis himself. "Baseless rumors," Travis declared, his designer-clad figure projected on giant monitors throughout the sleek Meridian headquarters. "We're investigating these malicious attempts to undermine our progress." Behind the scenes, Rick, through Sarah's contacts, arranged for a well-known financial journalist, Naomi Geller, to start sniffing around. Naomi was ruthless, respected, and had a particular distaste for tech bro fraudsters. Naomi reached out to Rick's anonymous source persona via encrypted channels. "I can't publish based on whispers," she said. "Give me more documents, names, trails." Rick knew the risk, but he also knew it was time to up the stakes. He provided Naomi with a curated dossier, enough to expose the scheme's framework. Without implicating his name or Sarah's, the article dropped like a bombshell. "The new face of corporate fraud?" the headline screamed. Naomi's article didn't name Meridian outright, but the breadcrumbs were obvious to anyone paying attention. Overnight, Meridian's stock dipped 8%. Regulators announced inquiries. Travis, for all his bravado, was visibly rattled during his next all-hands video call. It was working, but Rick wasn't done. Using his contingency access one last time before it was inevitably revoked, Rick planted a digital seed, an internal memo he knew Travis couldn't resist manipulating. The memo hinted at an internal whistleblower willing to go to the SEC with proof of the board's involvement. Predictably, Travis bit. Rick watched from the shadows as Travis convened secret meetings with his inner circle, desperately trying to identify and silence the phantom whistleblower. It was during one of these panicked scrambles that Zachary Hughes, the golden boy, made his first critical error. He ordered the deletion of specific financial records. What he didn't know was that Rick, working with Sarah's tech expert, a soft-spoken forensic analyst named Leo, had anticipated this and set up a honeypot server. The moment Zachary's deletion commands were issued, the server logged everything, creating a digital trail leading directly to him. Rick now had more than suspicious transactions. He had obstruction of justice. The final act of Rick's plan unfolded at the annual Meridian Gala, an opulent event designed to showcase the company's bold future. Rick walked into the glittering ballroom, uninvited, but not unwelcome. Whispers followed him like shadows. Some sneered, others pitied, but a few, growing few, looked at him with something else, curiosity. William Foster approached, champagne flute in hand. "Rick, I thought we agreed you'd retire gracefully. Rick smiled coolly. I'm just here to toast the future, William. Sarah, dressed to kill, appeared at Rick's side. She handed William an envelope. Consider this a party favor. Inside were copies of the server logs, the falsified invoices, and a letter addressed to the SEC already filed. William's face paled as he read the contents. You made a mistake, Rick, William hissed. This will destroy you too. Maybe, Rick admitted. But at least I'll go down knowing I took the rot with me. And then, like clockwork, the lights dimmed and Naomi Geller appeared on the gala's massive LED screen. Good evening, Meridian. I thought it fitting that we announce the next phase of our investigation here tonight. After all, transparency is the cornerstone of innovation, isn't it? The room froze as Naomi's live expose unfolded, detailing the shell companies, the ghost vendors, the obstruction. Rick stood silently at the back of the room watching the empire of deceit crumble. Travis stormed out. Zachary tried to delete files from his phone, oblivious to the FBI agents quietly slipping through the crowd. William simply sat down, defeated, the champagne glass slipping from his fingers. Sarah touched Rick's arm gently. You did it. Rick nodded, but his eyes were distant, fixed on the river of faces now awash in panic and shame. This was never about revenge, Sarah, he whispered. It was about truth. And truth always finds a way. The storm clouds over Bianca Caldwell's empire had gathered for months, but now the thunder of her revenge echoed through the highest towers of the corporate world. Gregory Caldwell's disgrace was merely the prologue. The real reckoning loomed over the city like an executioner's axe, and Bianca held the rope. The corporate world had always been a chessboard, but for Bianca, the game had changed. She was no longer playing to win. She was playing to purge, to erase the sickness that men like Gregory had injected into the veins of Caldwell Holdings. His betrayal had unleashed a monster in her, one that no longer feared the consequences. She wanted every lie exposed, every accomplice dragged from their glass fortresses, every shadow agent tied to Volkov, her husband's puppet master, burned in the light of day. Her enemies thought they had seen the worst of her when she destroyed Gregory and Cassandra. They had no idea what was coming. Volkov had always been a ghost, untouchable, invisible behind shell companies, diplomatic immunity, and assassins cloaked as businessmen. His reach extended beyond finance, deep into politics, media, and even the global arms trade. He was a cancer in the system, and Bianca intended to cut him out. Her first strike was subtle. She orchestrated a calculated leak through international whistleblowers, exposing a chain of atrocities tied to Volkov's subsidiaries, human rights abuses, environmental disasters, illegal mining operations in conflict zones. The world gasped in horror as the evidence unfolded across major news outlets. Volkov retaliated, unleashing cyber attacks on Caldwell Holdings, manipulating the markets, and even attempting to frame Bianca for insider trading. But Bianca had anticipated every move. She had hired Ethan Cross, a former counterintelligence operative whose Black Ops experience turned Caldwell Holdings security into an impenetrable fortress. Ethan's team traced Volkov's digital fingerprints back to a private banking syndicate in Zurich. It was time to force the ghost into the spotlight. Bianca announced the Phoenix Summit, a global event meant to unveil Caldwell Holdings' transformation into the most transparent conglomerate in history. But behind the facade of corporate reinvention, the summit was a trap. Ethan had identified Volkov's Achilles heel, his vanity. For all his cloak and dagger theatrics, Volkov couldn't resist displaying his power in elite circles. Bianca baited him with whispers of a once-in-a-lifetime acquisition, a new AI technology that could revolutionize global finance and military systems. An exclusive auction would be held during the summit. She leaked false intelligence suggesting Caldwell Holdings was selling the technology under duress, desperate to stabilize the company after Gregory's scandal. Volkov swallowed the bait whole. He sent his proxies to negotiate. Bianca played along, feeding them just enough fake data to lure Volkov into attending in person. Let him think I'm cornered, Bianca told Ethan, her eyes cold and precise, Let him think the lioness is bleeding. That's when he'll strike. The Phoenix Summit was held in the heart of Manhattan in the same tower where Gregory had once ruled. But this time the air was different. The gala's theme was rebirth, an ironic nod to the cleansing fire Bianca was about to unleash. Billionaires, heads of state and media tycoons gathered under crystal chandeliers, unaware they were stepping into an arena designed not for celebration, but for execution. Bianca arrived in a gown as black as obsidian, her diamond necklace shaped like a phoenix. Mid-flight, a message to her enemies. Volkov appeared hours later, disguised under a new identity, accompanied by his entourage of diplomats and mercenaries masquerading as investors. But Bianca had every face memorized. Ethan's surveillance team had infiltrated the gala, tracking every breath, every whisper. When the auction began, Bianca stood before the global elite and smiled, a predator among prey. "I present to you not a product," she announced, her voice slicing through the opulence, "but a reckoning." The lights dimmed, screens around the room roared to life, displaying the damning evidence Bianca had gathered. Names, faces, bank accounts, secret meetings, signed documents. Volkov's empire laid bare. The room erupted in chaos. Security teams locked the exits. Interpol agents embedded among the guests moved in. Volkov rose from his seat, fury in his dead eyes. "You don't know what you're doing, Bianca." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," she replied, her voice a blade. "I'm ending you." Volkov lunged, but Ethan's team tackled him to the ground. The world watched live as the untouchable ghost of the underworld was arrested in the heart of the empire he sought to control. Bianca's trap had worked. Volkov's arrest triggered a global domino effect. His syndicate crumbled overnight. Politicians, CEOs, and bankers who had danced in his shadow were exposed, arrested, and disgraced. Bianca Caldwell was hailed as a hero, a titan who had dared to do what no government could, tear down an empire of corruption from within. Caldwell Holdings' stock soared. Investors hailed the new era. But Bianca knew this was only the beginning. "I didn't do this for the applause," she told her board. "I did this because no one else had the spine." She overhauled the company's policies, installing bulletproof transparency systems, donating billions to the communities her late husband's greed had ravaged. She turned the empire Gregory had used to enslave others into a weapon for justice. But victory came at a cost. Her personal life remained scarred. Rachel, though safe, struggled to find her place in a world that now saw her as the daughter of a queen, not just a grieving girl. One night, Bianca found her on the balcony, staring at the city lights. "I miss him sometimes," Rachel whispered. "Not the monster he became, but the dad I thought I had." Bianca sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I miss him too," she admitted, tears threatening to spill. "But we don't let the past define us, Rachel. We rise from it." Rachel looked up at her mother, seeing not just a CEO or a warrior, but a woman who had bled, broken, and still stood. "We rise together," Rachel said softly. Bianca smiled. For the first time in months, it reached her eyes. Bianca wasn't content with one victory. She announced the Phoenix Protocol, a radical movement designed to hold corporations accountable beyond the reach of governments. She partnered with activists, whistleblowers, and watchdog groups, creating a global coalition to expose corporate crimes in real time. She knew she was painting a target on her back. Volkov's allies would want revenge. But Bianca Caldwell no longer feared the shadows. She had become the fire. Years later, the skyline had changed. Caldwell Holdings was no longer a symbol of excess. It was a beacon of accountability. Other corporations followed suit, fearing the wrath of the woman who had turned corporate warfare into an art of justice. Bianca, now older, wiser, carried the scars of her battles like badges of honor. Her legacy wasn't the wealth she had reclaimed. It was the world she had forced to confront its demons. On the day the city unveiled a monument to the victims of Gregory and Volkov's schemes, Bianca stood silently at the back of the crowd. Rachel stood beside her, holding her hand. "You did it, Mom," Rachel whispered. Bianca squeezed her daughter's hand, tears streaking her face. No, Rachel, we did it. And as the monuments, flames flickered in the wind, Bianca Caldwell, the Phoenix of Wall Street, finally let herself breathe. Her reckoning was complete. But her fight? It would never truly end.